next guest had her organization that she has founded kicked off or started with just a tweet, as they were called at the time. Susan Lomas is a geologist, and has been in the industry for over 30 years. And she developed, along with her colleague Julia Gartley, developed a mining industry focused training program called Digger. And she's going to tell us a little bit about that today. But first, Susan, I just want to welcome you and thank you for taking the time to speak with us. Tell us a little bit about your organization, MineShift Foundation, and its precursor, which was the Me Too Mining Association, where you got your inspiration to do that. And I'm sure the audience would love to know, as would I, what was in that tweet that got your organization started?
Yeah, and I wish I had kept it. But I think with a lot of people and individuals, certainly when there was that transition to the new platform, we decided that this was not a safe space anymore. But it was about, which is, and why, the inspiration. We talk about the inspiration for starting something. When the Me Too movement was swirling around, nobody in mining, the women in mining, the men in mining, nobody was talking about their experiences. There weren't a lot of Me Too's coming up in people that I knew in mining. And so obviously we needed to start that conversation. We needed to make that space. And that's where it came from. It was just let's make it okay to talk about these things in mining. And so that first tweet was just a big red sign, big red image, and then it just said, let's start the conversation. So it was very much something like that, and then a few follow-up tweets about starting the conversation about difficult subjects that we need to share.
And talk about the power of stories. I mean, you can't change anything, you can't affect anyone or influence them until you're able to tell your story. And that is really what your training is about. The bystander training is about creating an environment where people can speak up. And I'm just going to turn it over to you. I'm sure I have lots of questions and things I want to ask, but I know you have a few slides to share with us. So tell us about the bystander training and how it can shape the narrative or the story of how we do things here for the better and create better workplaces for everyone in the mining industry.
Sure. Okay, now of course it's not. Where it all came from was, before I even get into that, was 30 years in the mining industry, 35 years in the mining industry, and being in at least 30 different countries, and just experiencing all of the different mining environments within Canada, all the different people in mining. And as I do always say, I have had the most incredible experiences as a geologist, traveling the world, meeting all the people in mining, being in mines, being in exploration camps. But every now and then there was a completely, absolutely horrific experience, and hearing about other people's experiences. But I started Lionsgate Geological Consulting. It seems so easy when I look back at it. Of course, it wasn't when I did. But I was working for a consulting company, and I didn't have really control who clients who I were working for. I did take a year off from them after about 6 years of working there for parental leave. And then when I was going back, it was, oh, you're coming back. Okay. What, we'll have to think about, where you're going to go and what you're going to do. And it was like, they hadn't prepared that I was coming back. They had almost kind of forgotten that I was coming back. And, I'd worked 5 years to get an office out of cubicle land. And, oh, yeah, no, that office is taken now. So, I was going to be thrown back into the cubicles. And all the mentors that I had were now gone. And I was like, and I know the hourly wage that I was making. And I also knew that they were charging me out to clients at almost 3.5 to 4 times that amount. And I really started thinking, okay, why am I going back there? I'm not going to learn from anybody. I know how to do this work. Why don't I make that 3.5 to 4 times more? I had some advantages. My husband does the exact same thing, and he was working for a mining company. So I know that there wasn't really that financial risk for
Mm.
me. All I needed was really a laptop and the software, which was quite expensive, about $25,000 at that time. But they did set up a
Wow.
plan for me to purchase that. And that's all I needed. I could work from home. I could be around my child. And so I did. I started Lionsgate Geological Consulting, and still seeing and observing and experiencing a lot of these challenging situations that women, but everybody, a lot of people face these challenges in mining. And that was in 2006, and it's still going strong today. Um, but some of these
That's
challenges that I
wonderful.
talk about, and we see some of these numbers here on this slide, thank you to Rio Tinto and Goldfields, that there are challenges within mining. There are challenges for women and there are challenges for men. There's challenges for everybody. 30% of women, 23% of women reported experiences of sexual harassment within the workplace. When I work through those numbers in terms of their number of employees and that they're mostly 80% male dominated, it's 2,700 women at Rio Tinto and 1,130 women at Goldfields. But I knew this listening to stories from men in mining that they were being sexually harassed also. But before these studies came out, there were no numbers. So again, now 7% sounds like a small amount of people, a small amount of men reporting these same experiences. But again, I work through the numbers. And at Rio Tinto, with 2,700 women, it's 2,500 men. At Goldfields, 7% of men, 1,130 women. It's actually 1,136 men are reporting those same experiences. And so intuitively, I knew this already, but it is a real eye opener for a lot of people that men have these same stories that women have. And we need to include them not only as, to find a solution to these behaviors, but also we need to include them in the discussions of recovery from these experiences and include them in studies going forward. 50% of workers, half the workforce in mining gets bullied at work. It's just a pervasive part of the mining culture in a lot of workplaces. And racism, which can be quite variable throughout different areas in different countries, can be quite high. I know that there are reports of the Indigenous and Inuit communities here in Canada that report incredibly high levels of racism, even or
Mm.
especially when those mines are in their own territories.
Well, Susan, thank you so much for highlighting that and for doing the math. I mean, sometimes this is something that we're not really thinking about, and I feel like there's sometimes this mistaken attribution that says that having women or having Indigenous people or marginalized people represented in the workplace is the problem itself. If we didn't have those people, the problem would go away. And what your story is telling us, what your data are telling us, is that it's actually not that at all. This is a culture issue. We want to create more respectful environments where those behaviors are not tolerated. And that is really the name of the game, because that enables everyone to participate and give the best of what they have to offer to the success of the business. So
Absolutely. The
thank
the
you for that.
history of the culture is that the bullies got promoted. The most
Mm.
aggressive people got promoted to be supervised so they could, keep everybody under control and really, have everybody controlled within that environment. And so it was always very aggressive. And
Mhm.
we are moving away from that, but still within the culture and at higher levels, or and I've had really senior workers, male workers, come up to me after giving one of these talks, and they're so moved because no one's given that opportunity to think about that culture and the impact that it's had on them. And they
Yeah.
sort of sit there and they realize how hard it's been to maintain that level of a protection, but also aggression that they are experiencing constantly. That bullying culture is impacting everybody. And once you point it out and talk about it, shine
Yeah.
that light, it makes a big difference for them.
I mean, I can just imagine it's such a weight off their shoulders, and it's such an opportunity to redirect their energy. And like you said, it's energy they didn't realize they were expending to protect themselves, or maybe to further and fuel the aggression in that environment. When they can withdraw that energy and say, okay, we're going to do things differently, um, they just get all this discretionary energy they can spend on more productive things. I
Absolutely.
just love that. So tell us a little bit about your solution and how it helps them. This is me being the engineer, right? Just how we redirect that energy into something that's more productive, more respectful, and just overall better for everyone.
Safer, safer for everybody. And again, the power of stories. It was really what inspired me to come up with Digger. So not only after that first tweet, but then CBC News within a lot of the local radio stations, or they started picking up on this story, these stories that I was sharing, and trying to get that conversation started. And so conferences started giving me opportunities to talk, and I really focused on getting into the health and safety streams of these conferences. And then again, more conversations were starting, more stories were getting shared, but they always ended with, I didn't know what to do.
Mm.
What should I have done? And I was really sort of struggling to come up with a good answer for that. And so I literally took a year off from Lionsgate, my consulting company, and I had a pile of papers that I printed out. I like I like the hard feel of paper in my hand. And I just started reading workplace cultures, transitions, how do you empower people to do something when something happens to themselves or in front of them. And that's where bystander intervention training came from, because that was a tool. We can't make companies have the right policy, have the right reporting policies, and have that perfect response to a situation every time. But what we can do is empower as many workers as wanted to learn, if they wanted to do independently. But now we're going into the mining companies to say, if you have an enterprise-wide training on this, then everybody knows what to do. Everybody can react in an appropriate and safe way when something happens. It's not confrontational. It's not attacking the person that's just said something. It's telling them what they said was not okay. And that's not the most impactful thing either. People are really surprised when we go through the Digger program. So here on the screen, I've got it. Digger is direct actions, indirect actions, get a coworker, get an authority, engage the target, and record what happened and report it to an avenue that's going to be safe and you feel that's going to be purposeful. But the most impactful one of all of those is engage the target. There's so many impacts that they're feeling, so many negative feelings. They're scared, they don't feel safe. Having somebody
Mm-hmm.
come up to you in that condition and say, I just saw what happened to you. Are you okay? Let's go somewhere where you feel safe again. I'm going to write down what I just saw and I'm going to give it to you. And what help can I give you in finding somebody to report this to? Right there,
Wow.
you're starting to dissipate so many of the impacts. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go confront that person that enacted that behavior.
Yeah.
Talking to that person that it happened to is the most impactful thing that you can do, because you're bringing them back to safety. You're reconnecting them to your workplace and your community within that workplace.
Thank you for sharing that example, Susan. That's such a beautiful nugget and a reminder. I mean, first of all, that this doesn't have to be perfectly executed every time. I
Yeah.
think sometimes when difficult things happen, when something happens that scares us, we can go into that freeze mode, right? Or that fight or flight mode where we do something that doesn't ultimately really help the person that's maybe just been harmed by a remark or an incident that has just occurred. So if we see it, we can develop that skill. It's almost reminding me of first aid training or being a first responder,
Yeah.
but it's not for accidents in the physical sense. It's for psychological safety and
Yes.
well-being.
Exactly. And it's that reconnection because I've thought of always, and it still happens to me that you think of that perfect thing to say 10, 15, 20 minutes the next day, even
Or
after
2 weeks
something
later.
happened. And so one of the things that I encourage people to do is find a sticky note, write down some phrases. That's not okay. You can't say that. Stop saying that. Whatever's going to work for you, because there's no magic phrase. Everybody has to find that within themselves, what they feel comfortable saying. And if you go to, particularly the Meeting Mining website is still up, and we still have a lot of those phrases written down there. Put it on a sticky note, put it beside a mirror, and say it out loudly. Maybe no one else is home, or wherever you are, so
Or
that
maybe they are. They can learn too.
yeah, and it comes more naturally when you need it. That's a really important exercise. And that's part of building that safety toolkit, is have those phrases, have them ready, and they will come much faster when you need them. And one other sort of quick story to share was, we were in this training package that we do after the initial presentation. We go into these scenario discussions. So I present little groups with actual scenarios that I've heard about or that have happened to me, and the people that are attending go through the impacts of that behavior. It's important to be empathetic and understand how these things can impact the people in the area, but also the person that it just happened to. And one of the conferences that I was doing, one of the courses at, I think it was the very first one actually, and it was a scenario on stalking in the workplace that was happening. And usually we use quite gender neutral names. So we're not assigning gender. We want people to play with different gender scenarios within that. But everybody usually puts the target as a female and the aggressor as a male. And he stood up and he was summarizing what his group had discussed. And he said, well, actually, aside from what the group just said, what I would do was I would talk to the woman and find out what she was doing to encourage this behavior, because obviously she's doing something.
Ooh.
And it was so clear in the scenario that she was clearly messaging this was not okay, that she didn't want this. And it took me a second. I was, wow, okay, but this is why we're here. We're here to have these discussions and conversations. And Julia was there, and she jumped in too, and we had a really good discussion. He was actually in that course with his daughter, who just graduated engineering and was coming into the industry. They were in the course together, and she contacted Julia the next day and said they had about a 3 to 4 hour conversation that night, where she shared a lot of her experiences with her dad that she'd faced already, even in university and her first year in the industry. And that was a conversation they never would have had unless he had said that, or unless they had attended the course. But it was an incredible learning experience, I think, for everybody that was in that room.
Wow. Well, thank you, Susan. Thank you for everything you're doing to transform workplaces across the mining industry. I know that, countless employees, men and women and non-binary people, are benefiting from the impact of this training. And we wholeheartedly recommend this as Artemis to every mining workplace, that they need to get in touch with Susan and find out how to get the digger training in the workplace. It's not expensive. It is something that we really would love to see as standard, right along with all of the safety and first aid and safety procedures that we have when we come on site. Keeping people psychologically safe and bystander training is just such an easy and powerful way to do it. So thank you, Susan, for taking time to share your story with us. Thrilled to have had you with us. And we're about